Stay hungry, stay foolish.
So now on the Innovation Show, we welcome Kieran Harte, General Manager of Uber Ireland. Welcome to the show, Kieran.
Thank you for having me, Aidan.
Good to have you, man. And it'd be really interesting, before we go into Uber world, to get your background, because you've had a really varied background that has a common denominator the whole way through, which we'll touch on in a few minutes.
Yeah, you're probably right. I've always been involved in digital businesses and kind of the media side of things as well. So back in Australia, I worked with the equivalent of the Golden Pages there, looking at sort of turning those print businesses online. I then went into classifieds businesses, and specifically realestate.com.au was the company I last worked for back in Australia, which was, again, one of those first kind of big businesses which took a really traditional print background and started making money from it in an online world. So
when was that?
That was, God, now I'm showing my age, aren't I? So it must have always been around 10 years ago that I was back in Australia with that. I came over to Ireland, 8 years ago with the Irish Times, who invited me over. I was the commercial operations director for their sort of digital strain of sites.
Yeah, so right into the recession in Ireland.
It was April 2008, so I really felt like I'd missed that party.
So many of people who are working in digital started then, and I suppose that was the opportunity. It was like, there's a need here. It's time to start investing. It's the age-old problem where, wait until there's a burning platform, or the platform is actually burnt to do something about it. But you were brought in, and you mentioned the property part, so that was really interesting. So you came over into Irish Times, but you worked in publishing, and then what was the next step?
So I came over just at the time Irish Times had purchased myhome.ie. They also had titles in Ireland.com, which we're trying to set up as a lifestyle site. And then there was some other sites, and also sort of like a media, electric media sales business as well that they had part ownership of. So there was a few digital properties there that they were bundling together to see how we could work those, and I guess a little bit outside of the standard scope for the Irish Times.
Yeah, and what was your next step then after the Irish Times?
I was at the Irish Times for around 4 years, and then I had always kind of known the Fallon brothers, who set up Daft.ie and Distilled Media. Eamon had actually spent time in Australia looking to set up Daft in Australia, and of course the realestate.com.au business would have been very familiar to him. So at that point I really got excited about the idea of getting back into a digital first business, I guess, and really get back into the digital game. So that was an easy job to accept, and they're a really interesting Indigenous company, the guys, starting from scratch on property was their first big play, and then obviously they rolled into boards and adverts.ie, and then the journal.ie, which is doing really well for them now too.
Yeah, and they were such early movers. I mean, Brian was 16. Yeah,
16.
Yeah, like amazing. And
what do you call it, your gap year or your leaving cert? So yeah, like an incredible story, and they did really well. They did really well to set it up, but I guess in the background they kind of did really well to focus on it as a business and grow it rather than just selling it or flipping at the first opportunity they got.
And they did it and also feeding all the other businesses then as well, adverts as well, which they flipped recently.
Absolutely,
last year.
Yeah. So they did a great job in using the success and also kind of that network effect. Once they had a great audience on Daft, gave them a great platform to start advertising their other sites, and enticing users to use the others. So they did a really good job of trialing a few different things in a digital space, and it was great to see from an Indigenous company.
Yeah, and you mentioned the network effect there, because that kind of leads us neatly to where you are now. So you're now general manager for Uber Ireland, and the importance of the network effect there, but also the mapping, the mapping world that's so important to Uber's present as well as its future. Can we talk about your role with Uber?
Yeah, certainly. So I'm general manager for Uber Ireland and Northern Ireland. We've we're operational in Dublin and Belfast, meaning we have sort of cars on the roads in those cities. We also have a really large, what we call a centre of excellence, which is our customer service hub for Europe, and that sits down in Limerick. So there's currently just under, I think, 200 people there now, and they're sort of servicing all of our partner drivers and passengers across Europe. So big part of our European business as that grows so quickly. And my role is really to try to expand our services on Irish roads.
Yeah, and so what to put it in context, what kind of figures, how many cars in Ireland and how many drivers, that kind of way, or taxi drivers?
Yeah, we've got thousands of taxi drivers lined up, and one of the benefits of a service like Uber is drivers switch it on, switch it off whenever they like. So there's no set shifts, there's nothing like that. So, the numbers will fluctuate depending on the season with Uber. But we're not growing anywhere near as fast in Ireland as we are in other markets. I mean, Uber's a pretty incredible story. In 5 years, it's spread to over 70 countries and over 500 cities. And the growth has been tremendous. In Ireland, we're not seeing that growth, which is unfortunate because there's some really exciting things that have come with Uber and all these other different cities. And it was when I saw Uber operating in my hometown of Melbourne that made me really think this is something I really want to do. Like just seeing them turn so many cars that were on the road into part of our transport ecosystem just meant there was, for the first time in Melbourne, reliable, a car at the push of a button within minutes and at really affordable prices. So, I saw that in Melbourne and I just thought, wow, Ireland is the perfect place for this.
Yeah.
Like it really, really is. So we obviously still think it is. We're still working pretty hard to bring those services in. At the moment, there's some regulatory challenges with doing that, but we certainly think we'll get through those and launch what will be a really exciting service in Ireland.
So, like looking at some of the kind of the failures of Halo, essentially, I've looked at this before. Was Halo fail, for example, in the States because they didn't act local? Because Uber seems to think global but act local and adapt to each market, and that seems to be the real success of what you've done. And what are the challenges in Ireland? So what do you see as the kind of blockers or ones that you have to overcome? Mary, you mentioned regulatory stuff, but what else are you seeing? Yeah,
I mean the big one is our service is UberX. So to give the users, the listeners, an idea, basically our ambition is to challenge private car ownership. So have a system where you can get a ride at the push of a button so affordably and so reliably that it challenges your need to own your own private car. Now, that's not going to happen until a lot of the cars that are already on the road become part of that ecosystem. So in Ireland, there's 1.9 million cars on the road. Only 21,000 of those are taxi. So that's a really small fraction. And, as much as we see in Dublin City at the moment and sort of the outskirts of Dublin City, it's not always that easy to get a taxi. When you think about places outside of Dublin, outside of the city centres, there's no way you could expect a reliable ride within minutes and at affordable prices. We're talking about being 30, 40, 50% cheaper than traditional taxis in a lot of the markets we operate in. So that becomes really exciting. Yeah. Like it becomes, technology has allowed us to overcome a lot of the challenges previously that would have stopped these things. It's now safer to ride with Uber because of all the technology that comes, within the app. So it's a really exciting prospect, like to be able to think about what Dublin, what Ireland could be like if, we had far more cars around to take us there. The exciting part about it for us is that, we're not asking the government to give us any money for infrastructure. We are talking about just getting more bums on the seats of the cars that are already out there on the road. So that has huge benefits for easing congestion in city centres. We can start taking cars off the road because people no longer need to own their own and they can share the cars that are going around. And we can start reducing, carbon emissions, which is going to be really important for all governments. Yeah, and for someone who owns a car, maximise the usage of that car because it spends most of its time parked. Absolutely, yeah. We do the math on it and believe that it's about 94% of the time. So parked out the front of your house in a shopping centre, at work. it's the second most expensive asset normally you'll buy in your life, and yet, it just sits around doing nothing.
It's amazing
So,
and deteriorates, and the price of it just goes down and down.
as soon as you drive it off the lot, it knocks about a tenth of the value off or something. So,
Right.
yeah, we certainly see the benefits then and what's really exciting is the people that can start seeing these economic opportunities. So the people who do own their own cars, we're seeing great case studies of stay-at-home mums and dads who send their kids to school, and then they can supplement the family income by going out, driving it around and using it to drive their fellow citizen from A to B. A lot of students study during the day, come out at night when it suits them.
Yeah.
It's really great things. We're seeing a lot of people who are nearing retirement or are retired who don't really want to be at home, every day of the week. So they're seeing it as a great opportunity to go out.
Because that was one of the things I was thinking about. This is because people are living longer because of technology as well. People are living longer. This has given them some supplementary income to a pension, and also keeping them occupied, because there's that whole kind of boredom effect that comes obviously when you all of a sudden you stop working.
Yeah.
But look, I just wanted to tell you one of the best experiences I had with Uber was I was over in Texas in Dallas, and I was in a restaurant and I was leaving the restaurant and we had an amazing waiter, and next thing I order an Uber. My waiter drives up in the Uber, and I was like, no, it's okay, I'm waiting for an Uber. And he goes, I am your Uber. Just finished his shift. And but the thing about it
I hope
was,
you
Kieran,
tipped him over the dinner.
yeah, I did. Luckily, he could have turned me down. Not you again, McCullen. So, but the funny thing was the level of service, because this is what really struck me. And maybe okay, I'll take on board that he was a waiter and he works in the service industry, but it was such a pleasant journey. I mean, he treated it so respectfully. He was a foreign national, and his car was immaculate. And I mean that was one experience. I had another experience in Germany, again in other countries, and the cars were ultimately clean. And is that what the Limerick team does?
The Limerick team are really good at answering challenges that come from both passengers and the partner drivers. And a lot of the time, it's about using the technology now we have in our pockets and just the real-time feedback loop. So at the end of every Uber journey, a passenger will rate their experience out of 5 stars, and the partner driver will themselves rate the experience or the passenger out of 5 stars. And it sounds a little bit trivial, but when you start thinking about that data in its full strength, it's incredible. It's a feedback loop. It's not just he said or she said. It's this ongoing feedback loop, which we're able to sort of envision back up to the partner drivers to say, hey, here's how people are finding you in relation to some of the other people using the platform. And, it might be cleanliness, it might be pickup, it might be navigation, all these sorts of things. We can actually help them say, okay, this is how I'm driving, this is how I'm in relation to some other people. And we find that a lot of people take that on board, and actually it helps them change their behaviour or helps them get a better sense of how they could provide a better service, which fundamentally we find that these people really want to do. It's their own car, it's their own time, and they really feel a personal belonging to their services they're offering. Yeah,
and it reminds me of that quote about facts without data are just opinions. And if you're going to somebody and it's a touchy subject, you're kind of going, your car smells. If the data tells us 20 passengers says your car is smelly or your car needs work or it's dirty, then the driver has to take action, and it makes it objective, I suppose. It
does, yeah. And look, a lot of them, a lot of the partner drivers that we do speak to are really grateful, because we do this in a really nice way. The things that bubble up on the app, and they can read all the comments that their passengers have left for them. The ones that are not so great, but the ones that are fantastic as well. And we find that a lot of drivers who have driven professionally before, who come over to work on the Uber platform, they get a real buzz out of getting that real-time feedback about, great crack, had a great conversation, great stories. And it certainly keeps them, gives them great satisfaction being able to read all of that as well during their day.
Yeah, no, and just to fast forward a bit now, because you mentioned, we talked about the maps and that kind of background you had of maps. But it is really, and you talked about technology being at the core of the platform, but maps are at the absolute core of the platform. And when you think of the kind of Apple disaster a few years ago with their Maps product. And people kind of go, why did Apple go and push for this quickly? And you kind of go, because without Maps, context is not there. And Google have such a massive head start. But in an Uber world, the map is the platform, really. I mean, and you have, and I think people may think Uber uses Google, to get ahead at the start, but you have a team, and some of the original Googlers who worked on the mapping platform working in Uber.
Yeah, absolutely. We're putting some huge resource into the mapping product, and exactly as you said, I mean, that is fundamental to what we operate. And it's not just kind of trying to replicate what Google Maps might have done. We've got our own really specific needs for maps. You know, the product itself has really specific needs to identify what are the safest, the most efficient places to pick up around the city centre, what is, you know, the safest way to drive, what's the safest way to go. And what we're finding is that there's huge amounts that we can get out of mapping our own data. And it's not for us, even when we talk about the maps, for us it's really about all of the data that we're capturing, like understanding how a city moves, where the demand is, where they're going, what times of the day, peaks and flows. We think it's really going to help us put us in a good position when we see things unfolding, and we do see this great drop in private car ownership and a lot more shared car ownership, and eventually things like full fleets of shared cars out in the road, which we'll hopefully be able to have a great knowledge of. We've got all that data to say, well, these are the most efficient ways of doing it, and that can impact everything. That can start impacting your pricing you can offer, because you can understand what's the most efficient, what's the fastest, the most popular. We're looking at ways now at the moment to really start making people share their riding experience as passengers. So Uber Pool is probably one of our most successful products in the last year or two, a bit like Uber version 2.0. It's not just that Aidan wants to get from Donnybrook into town, it's that Kieran might be sitting in Ranelagh on the way, and if it means that it's cheaper for you, your overall journey, you're happy to pick up one other person on the way, drop them off. For the drivers, that's great, because it gives them this perpetual trip almost. They can be picking up, dropping off, picking up, dropping off, picking up, and therefore they've always got someone in the car, which means they kind of have the opportunity to be always earning. So to do those sorts of things, the mapping becomes key, really becomes key to start learning about, okay, well, could we start thinking about making a journey cheaper if the person's prepared to go and stand on that corner? And there's all sorts of really exciting things. So yeah, the matching project is certainly a huge priority for us. We've got some great talent and skills in the team, but it's going to be a big project. There's no doubt about. You know, Google did a pretty fantastic job, but we've got our own sort of things to look for and niches to crack. But
even the value of that from, I mean, something you could sell. I mean, like, so, you know, let's think about the disruption now. So not the obvious disruption, like obviously to the taxi industry or to transport industry, to you know, transport like buses and trains, etc. Let's park all that stuff and move a little bit forward into stuff like what happens now when driverless cars kind of come in. So when there's no drivers driving those cars, and I don't know when that will become mainstream, and we'll have a few accidents along the way, I'm sure, like we already have. But so what happens then? I mean, you have the platform, and because Elon Musk announced the Tesla master plan 2.0 recently, and he talked about this, where your Tesla can be working for you when you're not using it, and it's similar. It's a good bit forward ahead of Uber's strategy at the moment. But like, where does Uber fit in that world?
Well, I kind of think, me personally, I kind of read that and think, I'm not even sure why you'd want to own that Tesla in the first place. Why do you need to have it come back to you? Or I really see the movement continuing of shared services, and I guess we're seeing that everywhere. That's not just in ride sharing. We're seeing that in Dublin Bikes is a great example. We're seeing that in all sorts of transportation, but all other walks of life. Look at Netflix and, you know, the Airbnbs. Well, the Airbnb is probably not one, but it's now just a shared service. We take so many of these things in life that we no longer need that ownership for. And that's certainly happening, I think. So I think certainly there will be a time, and I've got young kids, and I certainly don't think that they'll be driving cars.
Yeah.
I just don't think that it's. And someone said to me the other day, why am I so certain? It's because that autonomous cars are going to save lives. If I was to come onto this show and say, hey, I've got this amazing thing, it's called the automobile, we're going to drive them in Ireland, but 400 to 500 people a year are going to die on the roads. There's no way I'd be allowed to run that product. There's 1 million people that die on the roads a year. So autonomous cars are going to have a huge impact on saving lives. So what I think we'll see, I think it will come sooner than we expect, but I think that transition between the first ones arriving on our streets to no one driving cars anymore will be a bit longer than everyone's making out. Like that will take decades to kind of to filter through. But
yeah, it's that analogy of the boiling frog that you put a.
That?
Have you heard this one? I only heard this one with Carl Flannery, CEO of Storm Technologies, on the show. And he told me about this. I never heard about this, but the boiling frog analogy is you can put a frog in water and gradually boil the water and it won't jump out because it doesn't notice, because it gradually adapts, right? And so it's a bit of a myth, but. He used it as an analogy for the world. All these changes are gradually happening around us, and we don't notice until in 30 years' time, like you said, there'll be driverless cars in a sharing economy, and everybody will be kind of go, "Oh yeah, was that not the way it always was?" I don't really remember. All I remember was there was a horse, then an automobile, and then this happened. But it's the same kind of thing, and I suppose those incremental changes or incremental innovations where it goes to Uber, and then it goes to sharing, the Uber sharing, and then all of a sudden driverless cars using the Uber platform. So Uber's kind of, this is what I love about companies like Uber, that they're thinking ahead all the time, and traditional companies don't do that. They don't invest in the future, or what will that do? For example, right, so radio, what does Uber driverless cars do to radio? Because radio listenership is most strong in
great call,
in cars. So in the cars. Yeah. So now all of a sudden I can read, I can do my work, I can watch the TV, I can watch Netflix. What does that do to terrestrial TV?
Yeah.
Destroys that, because it's all an on-demand economy.
Yeah.
So your habits at home are now taken over by the car that you don't own. And that also, what that means is your iPad or your device that you use to view becomes way more important to you as well. So there's this kind of disruption that people don't see happening that will have a huge effect on the world.
Yeah, it's a really good point. We had a bit of a play around at the moment. And when you start thinking about Uber's been fantastic at disrupting itself. So Uber's first incarnation was as a high-end chauffeur service on demand. And that was what we kind of started. It's really luxury brand chauffeur cars in San Francisco, which would have been a great business. But the guys quickly saw an opportunity to disrupt themselves by going for the average cars out on the road, those millions and millions of cars that are already out on the road at a really affordable price point. And of course, a lot of people say we were eating into your luxury business mode there, but we did that. And then Uber Pool, which I talked about before, which is about even cheaper transportation by getting people to share. A lot of people are like, well, that's surely just going to eat into your UberX business. But no, we'd keep disrupting ourselves because we think it's the right thing to do. And if we're not doing it, somebody else will quickly be doing it. So we're already starting to look at, in more mature cities, if we can deliver you a car within 4 or 5 minutes from pushing a button on your smartphone, what else can we start delivering it? Yeah,
because that's something that's really interesting, because you've done some nice partnerships in that world. Like, even rewards, etc. Using certain cards, you get lesser fees. But you have, was it Lyft? You did you did some delivery. So there's Uber delivery.
So we did a partnership, which I actually with Walmart in the States, and that's a really interesting one, which I don't know all the details to, but the one we've kind of launched in a few more cities around the US, it's called Uber Rush.
Rush.
The idea behind that is what we're hearing from so many people in the cities we're operating in, so many small business owners, was that they opened up their own small businesses because they liked whatever it was, owning the record shop, making cakes, buying flowers. None of them wanted to get into online sales because they didn't have to worry about the logistics. So Uber Rush is kind of our play to see, can we be that logistics partner for these small businesses? So can we allow them to start selling online and then delivery through a pretty simple to use Uber platform? And we think there's a really exciting play for us there.
Yeah.
Once we can start, and again, once we can start diving into that data and understanding, well, hang on a sec, we understand that that's a really busy route. We may be able to, do 2 or 3 deliveries through there. Once you start playing around with all of that data and saying, okay, what will be the working price points to make this business work?
Yeah.
It becomes pretty fascinating.
But what's really nice is, you talk, a lot of the talk in software development is all about, lean development and MVPs, minimum viable products. You're doing that with physical world, where you're actually little trials here, measuring them, what's working, what's not, what kind of price points, and you've several of those going on at the same time, and it's that mindset that's frustrating not to see in traditional companies, because they would see, so say you decide, okay, the Rush project was a disaster, we closed it.
Yeah.
You'll go, that was a great success that we didn't pour millions into it.
Yeah,
or,
absolutely.
Or billions, and just throw the kitchen sink at it and go, that's our future. Instead you're going, here's several futures, we're going to back them all, see which ones fail, and then measure, why did they fail? Is it too early? Was the logistics wrong? Was the price point wrong? And that mindset is fantastic to have. And how is that embedded in the company? Like, I know it comes from obviously leadership, but how do you make it go throughout the whole veins of the company?
They do a great job of that. I must say, it's the thing I've since coming into the company, I've been really wowed by is just how they share those learnings. They've got a great culture, what they call playbooking. So pretty much any sort of experiment, anything that's done, whether it be good or bad, we playbook, and they make that really easy to find. Most of the way the reason that Uber's been able to scale at such pace is because each city team is pretty autonomous. You're given a small team, you're thrown at a city, and it's make it work. Whatever needs to happen, you need to work it out. Now you've got all these resources, you've got all this help behind you, but ultimately,
so that's act local. That's the local piece that comes in, and that's where it's been so successful.
Yeah, it has. And one of our key one of our key cultural values, as we call them, is celebrate your city. Like, it's really about what is it that makes your city tick? What is it that it's going to make Uber a success in your city? And you need to get down and really learn that. So a lot of our innovation has come from, we've got this, I guess they call it kind of marketing stunts almost. And
guerrilla marketing.
Kind of. Like one of the first ones we did in the States was Uber ice cream. One day of the year, we just said, right, we're all going to start delivering ice cream for free. And it's a way of just getting people to talk about the brand differently, people to download the app for free ice cream, who then go, okay, actually that's really smart technology. I might start ordering my cars through the same process. And each city is kind of given that challenge to say, well, what is it that your city would love to see? What can we do? What's going to make your city talk? And we've learned so much from those kind of things, which are realistically just kind of PR stunts and a bit of fun a lot of the time. But it really does help that innovation, because each city wants to make their such a success, and that culture of playbooking and making sure that all the learnings are there,
captured,
read through them, done them. And it's not, I think there's a couple of things we've failed at multiple times, because we'll come back to the playbook and say, right, well, that city did that. I know how I'll improve it. I'll do it this way. Of course, sometimes it doesn't work, and someone will come back to it a few months later and say, this has got to work. It's such a great idea. And we're like, okay, I'll read the playbooks and then and have a look. No, I think I can do it this way. And I've seen a couple of them now haven't worked again. But it really is that combined learning and just pushing people to innovate, which has really been enlightening for me.
That's great. And I was just thinking, so we've talked about a lot of the kind of innovations and the disruptions, etc. But like, if you think about the opportunities, I'm just thinking now from an Irish perspective. So public houses, so pubs were hit hard when drink driving laws were increased, etc. This changes the game again. So you talk about getting mass scale of Uber across the country, self-driving cars, etc. Like, I'd be looking at buying pubs in rural areas, because it makes them more of a destination. And so if you put on, really interesting Irish music at a beautiful location that had no taxis and had no people that could drive there before, all of a sudden changed the game for those. So there's, you win some, you lose some. So for example, autonomous cars, you have the third age of people living longer that
Yeah.
used to be able to make a bit of money from driving or taxi driving. They're kind of being disrupted now because the cars are autonomous. Then you have vehicle manufacturers. They're kind of going, people aren't buying cars anymore. And like, I suppose in that world, right, what happens to the vehicle manufacturer? Like, because they're going, wow, people are already stopped buying cars because people are getting fed up of buying stuff and they're getting more into experiences. And that's where I'm going with the pub analogy.
Yeah.
Forgive me. But you're kind of going, well, people are kind of going, okay, I want to buy more experiences. I want to experience life more instead of buying stuff that just goes off and becomes decrepit and whatever. So, but for the car manufacturer, this world, and I know Elon Musk said about Tesla and this car doing the work for you in the meantime, but I agree with you. I'm going to go, I don't need a car. Why would I need a car and have to do parking and all that kind of stuff? That's a pain. And I know you probably send the car to park by itself, etc. But
where do you have to buy a car park in your space? I mean, think about the benefits this has to housing in inner city. Like my background in Daft has made me all the more aware of this, but our building regulations require apartments in the city to have car parks. It's like, if they're not required, we can build apartments in the city for a lot cheaper. We can start getting people, we can start changing the face of inner city living. And that sounds all very grandiose, but think about if there's no need for all the car parks in the inner city, and not just, the big multi-story car parks, but all the sides of the streets that we currently have to give over to car parks.
yeah,
When this becomes a reality, when people don't need to own their cars and park them up on sides of streets all day and all night long, there's this massive chunk of the city which we can start doing new things with. And whether that's expanding retail, bikeways, all these kinds of really exciting things. When I start speaking to a lot of town planners from around the world, that's what they really love about Uber. They really start seeing it opening up the city again for them and being able to do things. And I think you're right. I think there's going to be a nice mix and match between services that do, across city runs like Uber. It's a great company, BlaBlaCars, a French company that's really moved ahead with doing sort of the intercity cars. There's going to be lots of different players, lots of different niches which support us not needing to own cars because we're starting to use multimodal services. One of the things we're really seeing in London is that Uber usage is actually connecting people from their homes to public railways and public bus services. So it's about that last mile solution. It's not so much about I'm going to forego public transport and take get my car
it's complimentary.
From home. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And as I said, that's what's really exciting, is that how does it interplay with all these things that the city's now changing and going through? What does it do to our public transport? We don't need probably all these circuitous bus routes, because we can say, look, let's have the most direct bus routes. Let's have these
clean up the roads again. Like,
absolutely. Let's start taking some roads off, because there's other ways of getting us from our houses to their sort of main public corridors.
And it does. I mean, again, shooting forward again to driverless, but like you go to your rural housing becomes more interesting again, because like you're kind of going, it becomes cheaper as well. And you talk about Uber
absolutely.
Pool. You have several people acting like a community, and maybe you don't like your neighbour. Can you remove people?
We'll
Block them?
We'll have to work on a feature for that, I think, won't we?
Uber block. But the one thing it's been brilliant talking to you is it kind of brings to my mind is, no matter what the future is, you got to back several versions of it, because you don't know what's going to come, and the amount of disruption we talked about, from everyone involved is going to happen anyway. We don't know when, because that mass adoption piece is the hard one to guess at, but you got to make moves towards it to survive, and I suppose future proof.
And look, it's a fascinating play at the moment about what the car manufacturers are doing with these new technology companies. When you look at who's really pushing towards a lot of that software, it's Google, it's Apple, it's Uber, digital companies that have never had a background in car manufacturing. But there needs to be a place where this all matches, because none of us have backgrounds in mass scaling car manufacturing either. So it really is, as you said. I think you're wanting to back a few players in this race, because we're not entirely sure how this is all going to all end up.
Yeah. So, but it's going to be interesting no matter what. Kieran Harte, MD of Uber Ireland, thanks for coming into us.
Thank you very much for having me.
Cheers. Okay, now on the Innovation Show, John Dennehy, CEO and founder of Zartis. Welcome to the show, John.
Thanks very much.
We thought it'd be interesting to first, before we go into what Zartis does and the skills gap that we see in the Irish market from a digital ecosystem perspective and a startup perspective, to talk about you, John, and your background and how you ended up setting up essentially a recruitment business around this ecosystem.
So if we go back into the mists of time, anybody who's my age, I'm 43, will remember the dot-com era quite well. I'd worked in South Africa and Australia for a couple of years. I came back to Dublin and I worked with a startup company that was sold to Aircom in 1999. I then set up my own company, which was also called Zartis.com, along with 5 excellent co-founders. We grew the company really quickly. Over a period of 9 months, we grew to 40 people, and we sold the company for $18 million. We had no outside investors, so we were on the front page of newspapers and on national television. And then a year later, the internet trapdoor opened, the whole thing fell apart, and we lost everything. So after that, I co-founded another company with my good friend Barry O'Neill and a Japanese colleague called Hiroshi Okamoto. So we licensed mobile phone games from Konami, one of the biggest games developers and publishers in the world. So we licensed their back catalogue. We started publishing their games in Europe and the US. We grew the company again to about 40 people. We set up a small development studio in Dublin and Cork, and we started building games for companies like Disney and Sony Computers. We sold that company in 2008 to a Chinese media group, and I started looking around at my next opportunity, and one thing that struck me was the lack of software to help small to medium-sized companies find talent and attract talent. And also I felt that the level of the quality of service in the recruitment sector wasn't particularly good in terms of IT. So we started off, first of all, building a software product which is now called HireHive.io, and that's basically a recruitment CRM for small to medium-sized companies. We have about 150 clients based in anywhere. They're from Kuala Lumpur, Cape Town, London. They could be basically anywhere. And that's a software as a service model. They pay a monthly subscription fee to use the software. From the work we were doing in developing that product, we found that a lot of the customers we were dealing with were saying the real problem was that they were finding there was a shortage of IT talent in Ireland. So they asked us, could we provide additional services to provide recruitment for them specifically focused on software developers. We're bootstrapping the product, so it was a great way for us to get revenue to further the software development. But actually what happened was the recruitment services part of the business became actually bigger than the software side. So today we're an integrated software and services recruitment company. We have 6 people in Cork and 12 people based in Madrid. Most of the Cork office is focused on software development, and most of the Madrid office is focused on recruiting IT staff from all around Europe and bringing them to Dublin and Cork.
So your background, this is because it's funny, we see this a lot with founders we've come across, and co-founders. When there's a team of people, it's usually somebody from a background, a specific background, whether that be sales in a certain sector, coming together with a technologist. But in fact, what you did was you've come from the startup culture, the technology culture, the background of that, have had ups and downs. And out of that, you've went, actually, I have a talent for spotting talent and bringing the talent to companies. And so you're matchmaking that talent. But an interesting thing, because a few weeks ago we had Justina Mazzoni on from Coder Dojo, and we talked about what Coder Dojo is doing for the future of there's such demand for startup individuals. And by that, I mean the ecosystem that goes with that, from coders, different types of coders, PHP, Java, etc., that there's not enough coming through the system right now for the demand that's in Ireland right now. So we've all these big startups, big tech giants here, all looking for people locally, but we don't have enough people trained locally. So how do you see that playing out right now in Ireland? There's the shortage? Is there a skills shortage?
There's definitely a skills shortage. I mean, if the value of an education is measured on preparing people for the workplace and preparing people for the skills that are needed in the workplace, the Irish educational system has clearly failed in terms of preparing people to have IT skills. if the purpose of education is different, to educate people with different languages or provide them with critical reasoning skills and better learning abilities, that's a different question, or it's a different story. But if we're measuring our education system on the ability to provide graduates or people out of school who have good IT skills, we failed miserably at that. I think if you go back to Coder Dojo and look at James Welton and when he initially came up with the idea, that was the genesis of the idea. Like, he was really strong on computer programming at school. He'd learnt it himself outside of school, but there was no way for his skills to be recognized in any way in terms of getting points for a university entrance. So he's done an amazing job, and the management team running Coder Dojo are doing an amazing job. There is a skills shortage in almost every Western country in the world, so it's not unique to Ireland by any means. It's a global issue, or certainly a Western world issue. To solve that skills gap, you can train people, which we'd all like to see Irish people being trained, and we'd like to see full employment and great jobs going to people here, who we know and are related to us and have gone through the education system. But you can't train people to be software developers quickly, or not quickly enough. The real demand in industry is for experienced software developers. If you want to create a Java developer with 5 years experience, it's going to take at least 10 years to create that Java developer, because they have to go through, computer science degree, they have to go through some kind of learning program afterwards, get their 5 years of experience, and that's a 10-year process. So what Coder Dojo is doing is a brilliant initiative, and it's definitely going to have an impact on what happens in, the 2020s. But right now, today, there are companies that can't grow, and there's economic development being held back because we don't have enough software developers in the country.
So how does Zartis help with that gap?
So we started looking at this issue from a commercial point of view about 4 years ago. We started working on a project called Make It in Ireland, where we were actually it was funded by the largest tech companies in Ireland. So we got funding from Google, Facebook, Twitter, Microsoft, all the big guys put money in to brand a website and an online social media campaign to help attract more IT professionals into the country. So the big multinationals have a shortage of multilingual people with some IT skills. They're also looking for very strong software developers, but the bulk of the jobs in the multinationals are not software development jobs. They're multilingual sales and support jobs, right? But just in pure numbers, that's the way it plays out. In the indigenous Irish tech companies like Phineas and Fergal and Datalex, StoryToys, where they're actually looking for people, it's with the software developers. They're not hiring for the multilingual skills nearly as much. They're looking for pure software developers. So with Make It in Ireland, we started to learn a lot about where people were willing to move from, where the talent was, all around Europe and indeed outside of Europe. We then started working directly with individual companies in a similar way that a recruitment agency would work. We would actually go out and headhunt the type of software developers that they needed to hire. Typically, they were coming from countries like Spain and Portugal, places hit by the economic recession. We'd reach out to them directly. We'd do video interviews with them, so it's all being done remotely. We'd screen them for communication skills, technical development skills, salary expectations, a reason they might move to Ireland, and then we'd talk to them about the opportunities that exist in Ireland, and we'd introduce them to client companies who would often hire them, and then we'd help them settle into Ireland.
Because it's funny when you kind of step back and you look at this, it's like the IDA with Ken Finnegan on in episode 1 from the IDA. He's talking about IDA's main mission of bringing business to Ireland from IoT to every different aspect of the new world, new business models. Then you have the likes of Niamh Bushman and everybody working on the startup economy within Ireland. But then companies like Zartis are actually bringing filling the gaps in between. So it's all part of the same ecosystem. It's really interesting when you kind of step back and you go, okay, where's the gaps? You're spotting those gaps. You're finding the people, and then you're integrating. It reminds me of almost like rugby teams or sports teams. What they do when they bring in a foreign player is they find them an apartment they're happy with, then they integrate them, and they make sure they're integrated into the society because then they perform better, whatever their task may be it a job or sports or whatever it is. So, John, we're also joined by Peter Faber from Surf Office as well. Peter, to ask you, so how does Surf Office work?
The concept is based that you can work remotely. You go to Portugal or Spain, and we have there the houses where there is the accommodation for you, the workspace, and community of other interesting people who do the same. Designers, developers, copywriters, marketing people, basically anyone who can work remotely.
Are you seeing a huge growth in this?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so this is, to segue with what John said, we're seeing a lot of progressive companies who are going, okay, I have a need right now for these companies and these people. And to move fast, I'm actually going to employ them remotely. They live in their own country, but where they're not working from their own apartments or from home, they're coming to places like Surf Office to work. And what is Surf Office? Is it an open space with open benches? Is that the concept?
Well, it's basically like a guest house with attached co-working space. So it's a regular workspace with fast internet. You can connect your computer, your laptop to external display. There are the meeting rooms if you need to have a Skype calls or to have the privacy. So it's like a normal co-working space, but there is the accommodation because you move to Lisbon for 1 or 2 weeks. You need the place to sleep. We don't have local people at all, only people from abroad. Our biggest market is in UK, US, and Germany, north of Europe.
And so they're attracted to the sun and the beach as well?
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's connected a bit with surfing. A lot of people come to Surf Office to work and surf.
Yeah.
At least to try to surf or learn to surf. They have 1 or 2 surf lessons. So you have many different experiences at the same time. So you kind of live like a local, because you work every day at hours in the office, but you are in Lisbon, and you go for your lunch during the lunch break. So you don't have that feeling that you are a tourist. You have that feeling that for 2 weeks you are the local in Lisbon, and you enjoy weekends and afternoons and evenings with other people who stay in Surf Office. You go to surf, you go for the dinner. That's the concept.
Very good. And how can people find you? Surf Office?
thesurfoffice.com, or if you just write to Google.
And where locations? Where are you based?
In Lisbon, in Portugal, and in Gran Canaria, Canary Islands, Spain.
So, John, where's next in this whole world ecosystem?
So there's a continuing kind of ebb and flow of migration patterns across Europe. For the last 5 or 6 years, we've seen obviously big migration pattern from the south of Europe and the east of Europe to the north and the west. So we've been probably a net beneficiary of that in the Irish tech sector, in that we've got a lot of Spanish and Portuguese software developers over the last couple of years. My colleague in studio with us from the Surf Office is from the Slovak Republic. We've seen some great developers come from his country. So what's starting to happen, though, is that the economies like Spain are bouncing back. So there's about 60% more opportunities today for Java developers in Spain than there was 12 months ago. So what we're starting to see happen is that mobility is slowing down, especially if it's purely driven by the economy. You know, there's no unemployed Java developers pretty much in Europe anymore, anywhere. So it's getting harder to get people to move from one area to another. What we're seeing is 2 things happening because of that. One is companies are acknowledging it, and they're opening up to candidates from outside of the European Union. So in Ireland, you can hire somebody from Brazil or South Africa, where there's a lot of mobility. And you can get a work permit for those people, a critical skills permit. If they earn over 35,000 euros per year and they're a software developer, you can get them a permit to work here, which typically takes about 6 weeks and costs about 1,000 euros. So we expect to see a lot more companies in Ireland getting work permits for non-EU candidates over the next 5 years. The other big change that we're seeing is that as the demand for skills increases, but the supply doesn't increase at the same rate, more and more power is shifting towards the candidate.
So John Dennehy, CEO and founder of Zartis.com, thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much.
So now in the Innovation Show, we welcome Fergal O'Connor, CEO and founder of Happy Marketing and Media. Welcome to the show, Fergal.
Thanks, Aidan.
Great to have you here. Let's talk about your history. So you've a really interesting background, and it really has been a journey, and you've seen the good, the bad and the ugly of media and the opportunities that have come out of that as well.
So yeah, Aidan, I started out really at the coal face, I suppose, of the media business. Came out of college with a marketing degree, and at the time not a lot of opportunities in marketing in Ireland, and back in 1992 when I came out of college. So straight into the advertising business, I've managed to get a job in a publishing company in Dublin on Eden Quay, and it was very, very hard sell. You know, we were into student yearbooks and diaries and medical magazines, and it was very much on the phone, get the client on board, sell the advertising, move on to the next one. Very high staff turnover. After a year and a half being there, I think I was the longest serving member of staff in the company. So, that was cutting your teeth very hard in the publishing and media business straight out of college. From that then, a friend of mine actually joined the company after about a year. And after about a year and a half too, we said, you know, this isn't exactly rocket science. Why don't we go off and do this ourselves? So set up our own media and publishing business based out of Kildare, servicing clients in Dublin. And we did that for about 3-4 years from Kildare until I moved down to Galway, got married, moved to Galway and did something similar in Galway. Then we set up another company in Galway called Educom at the time. So again, we were a publishing business. That kind of turned into a media agency business because we were dealing with a lot of clients from Dublin that were looking to sell advertising into the west of Ireland. And that's what we did for, again, another 3-4 years. Had my first child back in 2002, better get the year right. And from that kind of decided, you know, I needed to kind of get a proper job and kind of something that was steady income coming in, because as you probably know yourself and from talking to a lot of CEOs and business startups, that process can be quite up and down and a roller coaster ride in terms of revenue. So got a job with a company called Galway Now magazine. And at the time we were basically working out of a garage, and we managed to grow that business then into 5 lifestyle magazines. We had a staff about 15, 20 working for us. So that was a real great success story. But after about 3.5 years of that, decided it was kind of time to have a look at other media. I'd been in magazines for that length of time and just wanted to get kind of into radio. And at the time, News Talk had just gone national back in 2004, and joined News Talk as their West of Ireland regional representative, basically helping them to develop the brand in the West and kind of gain more clients. But after about a year and a half of that, it was kind of, I wanted to get into, again, something slightly different. I'd kind of found out now a lot about radio. I'd known a lot about magazines. And the next step for me was then newspapers. So I wanted to kind of get a bit of a grounding in that as well. So joined the Advertiser newspaper group, which is one of the largest free sheets in Ireland. At the time, they had 5 newspapers, and I was the sales manager of the Mayo Advertiser for 5.5 years. So a lot of experience dealing with kind of newspaper clients and local businesses and trying to help generate revenue for them through advertising and through local mediums. And from that then, again, stuck with newspapers, but moved back up to Galway. So I had really good grounding in the kind of Mayo market and dealt with a lot of the agencies from Dublin there as well. And then went up to Galway and became their direct sales and agency manager for the Galway Independent, different newspaper then. And again, there for about a year and a half. And just after that then joined Irish TV. So again, magazines, radio, newspapers, and then it was time to kind of have a look at what was going on television. So again, Irish TV had just started up at the time, literally no staff, just a new startup business, just had recently gotten a big investment, and joined them as their UK and Ireland sales manager. And it was all about kind of growing the business, growing the sales team, and obviously growing the revenues. And after about, I'd say it was about a year and a half there, a lot of our clients were just asking about video content, and it wasn't anymore about, you know, how do we get ads on the telly? It was more about how do we get our content from you to use on our own social media and our web platforms. And I just thought to myself, you know, there has to be an opportunity there for a business to provide that service to the clients that I was dealing with, which didn't seem to be available at the time. So we set up what was originally going to be a video content marketing business. And from dealing with our clients on the video content side, well, actually what we did was we started to do more of a strategic look at businesses. So a business would come to us and say, we know you do video content, can you do it for us? And we'd say, well, what do you want it for? What's the strategy behind what are you using it for? And they wouldn't have a clue. So it was all about just generating content because somebody had said, you know, you need to get a video done, but no real kind of thinking behind what they were going to use it for. So we started to bring that kind of strategic element into the video content. So we'd look at their communication plan. We'd look at the channels that they were using. We'd look at what they were doing well, what they weren't doing so well, and we give them advice on how to implement it best. And oftentimes they would say, yes, can you implement it for us and monitor and manage our campaign, which we did then as well. Out of that then, Aidan, something kind of interesting happened. People started to say about, can you buy media for us? Can you actually buy the advertising for us that you're recommending that we use for our business? And so we looked around and we said, okay, what's the easiest way to buy media? And a lot of it was, local newspapers, local radio. And the easiest way, or the only way to do it at the time and still at present, is you actually ring up the newspaper, you ring up the radio station, you email the rep in the radio station, you get a proposal sent out, the rep comes out and meets you, they go through what they think is right for you, you end up negotiating back and forth with them for a week or so, and at the end of probably a 2-3 week period, you get your campaign in place. And for us, as a kind of a small business, that was just too much in terms of time and resources that we were putting into just one campaign that was taking us 2 to 3 weeks to put together. So I thought to myself, there has to be, in this age of digital technology and online marketplaces, there has to be somewhere where you can just go and you can purchase advertising in a newspaper or radio station, not just in Ireland, but in the UK or wherever you want. And when I looked around, there wasn't anything. So there was no way of, lots of marketplaces in terms of, Google ads, website advertising, social media advertising, but no marketplaces for traditional media. So, put together kind of a business idea and a business plan, and I went to Enterprise Ireland with it, and they said, yeah, we think you've got something here. So we've been on the New Frontiers, Enterprise Ireland New Frontiers program for the last 3 months, basically helping us to develop this platform. So the platform is very simply a way for local advertisers to connect with local newspapers is our initial target market, or our initial MVP that we're developing. And from there, we will obviously grow out to radio stations, TV stations, online, social. So, but the initial MVP will be to link local advertisers that want to just buy an ad, which sounds pretty like a simple thing to do, in their local newspaper. And that's what we're doing at the moment.
Like, I was just thinking, listening to you there, the background, your tapestry, your rich tapestry of the different media, but also the problems in each of those media, giving you this opportunity to actually see the world through different lenses. Like, it reminds me of, when you get your eye tested as a kid and they put on all the different lenses on it to test your vision. You've got those lenses, except they've stayed there, and you've seen the world differently because you've gone through all this. But going to where you are today, the product that you're creating, I don't think that would have ever been created from a big newspaper or a big radio station or big TV for fear of self-cannibalization. And they'd be so fearful of what that could do, and fearful of the change. And it needs somebody from the outside like you, with the vision and with the experience, to actually do that. And have you seen any resistance from anybody so far?
Well, obviously part of the whole process that you go through when you're developing something like this is the market validation. So we have spoken to numerous advertisers on the buying side, mainly local businesses, because that would be our initial target market. But also on the media side, we've spoken to, Magazines Ireland, we've spoken to the Broadcasting Authority of Ireland, we've spoken to the Radio Broadcasting Commission, we've spoken to newspapers, and there's definitely, in some of the industries, that resistance to change. What they've looked at, I've found, is they've looked at how do we change our content to make it more digital, but they haven't looked at how do we change the process of actually getting our inventory to the client more digital. I even looked at it through our research, CNBC in the States still have a big event in the middle of New York in Radio City Music Hall, where they bring all the reps in and try to sell them advertising in a hall. And for me, in 2016, when the world is changing totally to digital, it perplexes me why people in media who have all this tech savvy still use these old fashioned processes of doing business. So there's definitely resistance out there to it. But I think when we spoke to the local newspapers and the regional newspapers and organisations like Independent News and Media, who obviously have a national newspaper but also have a traditional newspaper base as well, they can see that buy media is not a threat to them. It's another channel through which they can sell their inventory, and it's like having an extra sales rep on their team. But the great thing about this sales rep is never gets sick, never wants a day off. It's working 365 days a year, 24/7. And it's just an extra channel for them to be able to sell their advertising, and an easier way for people to buy advertising too from them.
And you're lucky that you're dealing with that level in a company like that, because the real person being disrupted here is the salesperson, or that's what they're going to perceive is going, well, this is taking me out of the game. And if you think about buying platforms like Google AdWords or Facebook ads or whatever it is, whatever online platform you can buy on, you're basically doing that for traditional media. And what I mean is, if you look at that solution will never come from the industry that it should come from, because I suppose they're dealing with this massive disruption. They're going through digital disruption, and they're so busy dealing with putting out that fire that they're not looking at the next solution. And this is just a common thing that you see all the time in disruption. You're seeing somebody from the outside who's looking in going, actually, we can solve that problem. And it's like Spotify. Like you should be able to buy radio in the same manner by demographic, male, female, under 18, over 18, whatever. But you can't, because there's sales reps in place, there's agencies in place, there's a whole ecosystem in place. Nobody wants to be disrupted in that ecosystem. Meanwhile, Spotify come along and steal a huge amount of the market, and are taking millions out of the Irish market as well, million plus anyway, and it's only going to grow. And, you know, your product in somewhere in the States, I think, can be real disruptor, because they're already open to buying stuff like iHeartRadio that way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would hate to think that I put any sales reps out of a job because it's where I've come from as well. So, and what I'd see it more is that rather than the sales team within the organisation suddenly disappearing, that they're re-employed to do other parts of the business. So you're not saying, okay, our sales team now is 5 people thanks to buymedia.ie, now we can get rid of 3 of them. You know, that's not kind of our ethos or what we're trying to do for the industry. What we're really trying to do is say, okay, this element of your media buying is now being taken care of, and somewhat there's a percentage of your media that's been bought through this. That means that this rep over here, maybe I could use for, you know, selling events, or maybe selling more digital, or doing something different within the organization, or dealing with a customer in such a way that they're not now selling them the advertising, but they're dealing more with the creative side of the advertising, and they're giving them they're giving the client a better experience overall as part of the sales team, rather than that you're losing a huge amount of staff.
What you said about redeploying people, that's a key point in the future of work, essentially. And from what you said, you've moved roles, you've moved companies, you've moved not industries, but you've moved segments within that industry, and that shows a real growth mindset where you actually wanted to grow and change and develop and get new skills. And that is one of the key skills, or one of the key mindsets for the future, where AI is going to replace a lot of people's jobs anyway. I mean, what you're doing with this platform is inevitable. This is going to happen. TV is going to be bought programmatically. It already is in some parts. Radio is going to be bought the same. This is coming. People are putting their head in the sand about it. Some people don't want to invest in that because they're seeing it as, well, I'm just actually voting for Christmas as a turkey here. And like, I think the only way you're going to survive is having a growth mindset to change and to develop. And as you said, if I'm a sales rep and I've been just selling space, now my job becomes why that space should be sold, and also other skills such as my customer service. Now I can actually look after my client better, maybe cater for them, understand their needs better and better. Where do you see the benefits from a sales perspective? Because we have a sales special coming up in a few weeks with a couple of killer sales strategists. But where do you see the future of selling?
Well, I suppose, Aidan, you've touched on it exactly the way I would see it there. It's about looking at ideas for the customer rather than saying, okay, this is space A, B, or C, which one would you like? And selling has certainly moved away from that, I hope. But I think, from my experience as well in the traditional media, it's still very much about that. It's very much about, we have a special on this space this week, would you like it? And if not, we'll have another special next week on another space. Whereas what the customer is looking for now, you know, I think the advertising client has become much more sophisticated. And even if it is only a small business, even if you're only talking a small shop in a small town in the middle of nowhere, that client has become much more sophisticated in terms of the way they want to buy. So the buying process has become now where a client investigates a lot more. They do a lot of research. They say that 80% of the sale is now made before the client actually approaches a sales rep at all. So virtually the decision is already made. Now it's about, for the salesperson, it's about how do I use the skills and the knowledge that I have of my industry to help this client to get a better outcome in terms of the sale. And it's not now about trying to maximize the amount of revenue you get out of a client when you're sitting down in front of them. It's about looking at a client or looking at a business as a long-term partner of your business, as a salesperson, and saying, you know, if I do something that's going to add benefit and add value to this client now, this is someone that I'm going to keep for life, or keep certainly for a few years, rather than, you know what, I'm going to go in here now, I'm going to really cream this client and I'm going to try and get as much out of them as I possibly can on this sale, and go out thinking you're great, and go back to the office and ringing bells. And that's not what the sales process is about anymore. It should be much more about consulting with the client. And you know what, if it's not right for the client there and then, you tell the client that, and you go on to the next sale and you try to help somebody that will actually benefit from what you're selling. And the future of selling for me is much more about a collaborative process, and it's about a partnership with your clients. It's about doing what's best for them, and it's about, if your clients can grow, then you're going to grow. And that's pretty much the ethos of our business, and it's almost a tagline that we have: we grow when our clients grow. And that's the way I think all selling should be approached now, is a much more collaborative, a realization that the client that you're dealing with isn't going to be bamboozled by, you know, sharp sales lines and, you know, leading them down a path of, you know, option A, option B, and, you know, you don't give them yes or no, all those old sales techniques that everybody was taught as a salesperson. It's now much more about investigating what the client is looking for and trying to come up with a creative solution for your clients, particularly in the advertising side. That's what we try to do all the time, and something that you can genuinely see is going to help their business grow. And if you can do that, then you've cracked it.
And you've definitely seen this with Happy Media. I mean, that's why you did it. You saw this need that was constantly there that wasn't being satisfied. But let's talk about now the platform, because you've got some funding. But are you looking for funding now at the moment? Are you looking for more funding? And do you want to get that message across on the show?
Yeah, well, absolutely. I think, Aidan, if you talk to any startup or any business and say they're not looking for funding, they're probably lying to you. No, definitely. In terms of now, we probably don't need any funding because we're very much at a kind of an early stage of the process. We've got a concierge MVP. We're really testing the market in terms of, we've got trading clients. So we've got clients trading on our MVP on a concierge basis. But what we need to do now, the next step for us, is we need to automate that system. And we've no shortage of ideas on what we want to put on the platform. It's just about, I suppose, a stage that we bring it through. So the first stage for us is we want to now automate that process. So at the moment, we want clients to be able to go onto the platform, enter the criteria for the campaign, and that matches them up with the best advertising campaign for their business. That's stage one. Then stage two is we want to have a planner for the client. So once the client books the campaign online, they then have a planner that they can download so they can monitor and manage their campaign much more easily. So they download an advertising or campaign planner to their own calendar, and it kind of keeps them on track with where their advertising is and how that's going. And then the next step is then monitoring and managing it, because that's obviously specifically in traditional media has been the real challenge for organizations and business. How do I monitor and how do I track my advertising? And it's usually because they just haven't kind of put any process in place of monitoring it. So I would always have the case where you'd go back to a business and you say, how did the advertising go? And they'd say, I haven't a clue. I don't know. It seemed a bit busier, but I'm not sure. Whereas what we want to do is we want to have a platform where, you know, from start to finish, you research properly, you plan your campaign properly, you buy it at the best rate, you get the best campaign for the best price, and then you have a way of monitoring and managing that campaign throughout the whole 6 months, 12 months, whatever period of time you're running your campaign. And you can see, when you look back then after a 12-month period, you can see, I did a campaign this week, my sales spiked here. Obviously that's connected to the advertising, whereas before there was no kind of monitoring of that. So that's where we're at in terms of the platform and what we want to do with it. So in terms of funding, yes, definitely we're looking for funding at the moment. We're currently funded by Enterprise Ireland on the New Frontiers programme. So we're coming off that in January 2017. So we'll be looking at either going either through the Enterprise Ireland route of match funding, or we'd be looking for a VC or investor to come in at that stage. The initial investment isn't huge. We're probably looking at about 100k build for the initial platform, but to really scale it the way we want it into the UK and into America and into Australia, because obviously we want to internationalise this business, we would probably be looking at anywhere between 500,000 and 1 million in terms of the overall kind of budget that we're looking at the moment. So that's really what we're looking at. I suppose in the medium term, we'll be looking at that sort of funding.
Your planner idea, I think, is great, because I've seen this as well, where somebody will run a radio campaign and you'll ask them, how does your Google Analytics do during that period? And they won't have even checked. So they won't have even thought of it. The timing of the schedule of my ads when they go out has a direct correlation with my website traffic. So many companies don't look at that. And I was thinking, when you were saying that, from your own platform, you know, it could tie into, okay, here was your spend, here was your ads, here was your radio, here was your SEO. But just to move on, there's a big event coming on the 24th and 25th of November. Can you tell us a little bit about that as well? Because it's in 2 weeks' time, so just to give people a bit of a heads up about that.
Yeah, Aidan. So Meet West is the west of Ireland's largest business networking event. It takes place in the McWilliam Park on Thursday the 24th and Friday the 25th of November. And basically the 2 days consist of, day one is a conference of speakers. So Neil Donlan, who's Head of Strategy, People and Regions for Enterprise Ireland, will talk about Brexit and the challenges and opportunities that brings to businesses. Joe Collins, Managing Director of Sales Performance, will talk about knowing your customer and how to take your business to the next level. I'll then talk about making sense of the digital maze and practical paths for your business. And the MC for the night is Noel Davidson, who's from the Entrepreneurs Academy. And then that evening there's a business dinner, and the after dinner speaker, we're delighted to have David McWilliams doing the after dinner speaking for that. Then on the second day is really kind of hardcore networking, so it's very much like speed dating for businesses. So the businesses have picked 15 other businesses that they want to connect with in either a partnership or sales way, and they basically have 15 meetings throughout the day. You get to know the other businesses in the region, they get to know you, and hopefully either a partnership or some business comes out of that networking event. And then that's it for the 2 days. And as I say, it takes place in the McWilliam Park Hotel. And if anybody wants any further details or wants to register or get involved, it's closing soon, so I'd advise people to get on there pretty quickly, and they can register at meetwest.ie, and our website is hmm.ie, so that's H for happy, M for marketing, and M for media.ie, and our trading platform, our advertising trading platform that we spoke about earlier, that's buymedia.ie, so buymedia.ie, buymedia.ie, and if anybody wants to get in touch by phone, they can get us on 0144 3311 or contact us by email on help@hmm.ie.
Fergal O'Connor, CEO and founder of Happy Marketing and Media. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks very much, Ian.